Hey there, this is Anna. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I have a tutorial for this poems flip book. This book was created using a die that is meant to make tabs for planners, but it worked out really well for a flip book. And the cool thing about this is that you can make this for any occasion, such as baby showers, weddings, Christmas, Mother's Day, any occasion. All you need to do is change the color scheme, the papers that you use, and the embellishments. For this book, I decided to go with a vintage theme, and I used it to display some of my favorite poems and song lyrics. And this is a die. It's called Journey Days Create a Tab. It's a steel wool die, so it will definitely cut through many different materials such as chipboard. It's a pretty large die, 8.5 by 11, so you need to be sure that you have a machine large enough to fit it. And the first thing I did was cut the tabs using chipboard and also the papers that I will use to decorate with. I will be listing all of the supplies used in this project in the video description below, and also some extra pictures of the inside of the flip book on my website, anareese.com, so make sure to check those out. And what I am doing here is sorting all the tabs and the papers into a layout of how I want the book to be. And remember that you need 2 sheets of the cardstock to cover the chipboard per page. So if your book has 10 pages, you will need to cut out 20 different sheets to cover both sides of the chipboard. And now that I selected the order in which the tabs will be on my book, I am ready to adhere the cardstock. And for this, I suggest using a wet glue. The reason for this is that it gives you the chance to move the paper around for a perfect fit. And liquid glue allows you a few seconds to move the paper around if you need to. In this case, I am using Fun Stamper's Journey craft glue, which I really like since it dries very quickly, but it still gives me about maybe 3 to 5 seconds to be able to move the paper around if I need to. It also helps if your bottle has a fine tip to help you get into the little areas to make sure that you apply enough glue so the paper will not lift. And once I'm done gluing all the cardstock on the chipboard, I am ready to start inking the edges. I am doing this just to give it a little bit more of a finished look, and I am using an ink called Oatmeal Cookie, which is a light brown, kind of like a craft color. And this is one of my favorite inks to use whenever I'm doing kind of like a vintage look. And I also end up using another one called Hazelnut Blend, which is a darker brown, and I use that one also on the edges and also on the very edge of the chipboard, just to cover the light brown of the chipboard. So this gives it a more finished look, and of course it goes perfect with the vintage theme that I'm going for. And after inking all the edges of the chipboard pages, I am ready to start working on the embellishments. For this, I use different stamp sets, and I use black licorice, which is a black ink on white cardstock, and also I'm using the same Hazelnut Blend ink that I used to ink the edges to stamp the images as well. I wanted to have both black and brown available, that way it can match with the colors of the cardstock that I'm using as a background. After stamping the images, I will be inking them using oatmeal cookie and hazelnut blend and then fussy cutting them, and this is how they turn out. I will also be creating some pockets for some of the pages. You can store many different items such as pictures, tags, notes. So the height of the box of the sleeve will depend on what you're trying to store in them. After cutting all the pockets, I will be adding some texture using some stencils and some stamps. The first one here is a stencil, and I will be inking it with both hazelnut blend and oatmeal cookie using a dauber, just straight onto the cards, and it will create a very nice image for the background, and then just inking the edges with both oatmeal cookie and hazelnut blend. For the dark cardstock, I will be using Distress Oxide ink since they show up really well on dark paper, and also they create very cool effects if you add water to them. You can either mist or use a water brush, as I will be doing here shortly. To adhere the pockets, I suggest a stronger adhesive such as this double-sided tape, and make sure to only apply it to 3 sides of the pocket, that way the top will be open. For this first embellishment, I used the tape runner and I adhere it right on top of the pocket. I also used some liquid glue, but for the future ones I ended up just using foam squares because I really liked the extra dimension for the embellishments. One of the great things about this die is that it allows you to place the tabs either towards the top or towards the bottom, depending on the look that you want to go for. So it's very versatile and it allows you to create different layouts. I added pattern paper to most of the tabs, except for the very front one. I wanted to be plain. That way I can stamp and create different effects with backgrounds, such as this one here. I'm using vintage photo distress oxide ink, and I will be applying it straight from the stencil. And if you add a little bit of water, you transfer all the really nice ink onto the background, and it creates this really nice effect. To do the edges of the front page, I wanted to try something different. I applied the vintage photo ink right on the mat and then just sprayed it with water and just kind of rubbed the page on the ink directly. So this gave it a very nice border around the page, and it looked very organic, so I really like that. And it's such a fun and very simple technique to do, so I was very pleased with it. To hold the book, I decided to use book rings. These are 1-inch book rings, and I wanted to make them look like rusted. So I used some of the Fun Stampers Journey Silks. These are inks in these little cute bottles that look like nail polish. I used the bronze, gold, and dark roast. First I put the bronze and let it dry. Then I added the gold, just in different spots, not the entire ring. And lastly, I came back with the dark roast and just kind of spotted here and there. And it came out really cool, and it's a permanent ink once you heat dry. So just be sure to be careful, because of course it's metal, so it was really hot, but they turn out great. So it's a very simple technique. I love these silks. I decided to use 4 rings because by putting 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom with 1 hole in between, it allows each of the pages to be held by at least 2 rings. So this makes it very stable and very easy to flip each page. So this was a nice choice to hold the book together. So I highly recommend using the 4 rings. Of course, if you have more pages in your book, you will need larger rings. And these are the poems and lyrics that I chose to include in my book. I will be cutting all of them at once, and that will help me determine which page I want them to be on. The longer poems, of course, will be on the larger pages, and the smaller ones I'll be able to even cut line by line, which is a look that I really like. And if you decide that you want to cut individual lines, such as this one here that I'm about to cut, I would suggest inking first. If you're going to do a color like I'm doing here, to go with the vintage look, I inked the white paper using oatmeal cookie and also the darker brown ink, and then cut line by line, but not all the way through. I left the very end intact, and I did this so as I'm gluing them on the page, I don't have to figure out the order of the lines. If I cut one by one at the end, then I'm just going down the paper and adhering it to the cardstock. So that saves you some time. And as a last embellishment, I am using some of the gold silk and just splattering throughout the book. On the front page I also used the bronze one, and also on the first page on the inside, but for the rest I only used the silk. These dry fairly quickly, but still be careful to give it a few seconds in between before flipping the pages, just to be sure that it's dry. That way you don't take the chance of smudging them. As you probably already noticed, I also used some natural twine and some matching ribbon to tie to the book rings at the very front of the book. This step is of course optional. I just thought that it would give it a more finished look, and the colors match perfectly with the theme of the flip book. And this is the final flip book. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you give the project a try. If you create any books, please send me a picture. I would love to see what you create. And as always, if you have any questions about the process or any other products, feel free to leave me a comment below or send me an email. And don't forget to visit my page anareese.com to see more detailed pictures of the inside of the book. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you next time.